I'm Rachel Metz, and I am DIY obsessed. I love to dream, build, and create one-of-a-kind pieces for my world. My life revolves around my loves and all of my power tools, but I believe that building does not have to be difficult. I love creating unique pieces for my space that don't cost a fortune or take days to make. For me, DIYing isn't just a hobby, it's a lifestyle. Are you down? If you have a guest bedroom, I don't know about for you guys, but it tends to become a forgotten space until there is an actual guest that has to stay here. That being said, I haven't been stoked on our guest bedroom lately. It definitely needs a bit of a makeover, but I want to make a place for my guests to be able to work because everybody travels with laptops these days. With this nook, I want to build a desk, so let's just head to my garage, sketch it out, and get started. I love working with this space, and because this guest bedroom has a small nook that dips behind the wall, I want to build a functional yet minimal workspace for our guests. That being said, I want to attach it to the wall with a desk, a couple of shelves, and then I'll wipe on some Danish oil to bring out the natural wood grain. For this project, I'm going to grab my piece of plywood, a ruler, clamps, a circular saw, pencil, speed square, and some painter's tape. All in all, I spent about $91 because I invested in a higher grade plywood. You can grab a basic piece of plywood and it will bring down the cost to 75 bucks for this entire project. We're gonna start by just cutting down the back piece of the plywood, which will be what we're hanging onto the wall. So for everybody's space, it's different. Mine is gonna be about 66 inches long, but obviously you can go ahead and change that to fit your wall. And make a couple of tick marks across the board. Honestly, I don't draw anything straight, even with a straight edge. This is like my best friend with woodworking. It just helps create the starting line. That way you have a nice and straight guideline. Now you're just gonna connect these two starter lines with your longer ruler. To ensure that we're cutting directly on this line, you wanna make sure that blade is right on the outside mark of that line. You go in and just kind of mark where the end of your saw should go. Then you take your long ruler. You wanna clamp this ruler down into place. You just wanna make sure that whichever clamp you're using is extra, extra, extra secure. So don't use just like a regular like open and close one. You want one that you can screw onto the wood. After I clamped this ruler down into place and made sure it's not gonna move, I'm gonna just clamp my wood to my actual workshop table to ensure that this guy does not shift at all when you're working on it. If you add some painter's tape to where you're actually going to be cutting, it acts as almost a protective shield for when the blade goes through it to prevent the wood from splitting at the end, giving you a nice clean cut. And you can just go back over that because you can see it through the tape. Safety first, you always want to protect your eyes and your ears. So make sure that you got that covered before you make your first cut. And now you're just going to rip it down. With this piece of plywood, I'm gonna be cutting down the desk and the shelves by repeating the same exact process that I just showed you. You'll be going over these lines with tape again to prevent it from splintering. Now, the tips that I'm giving you, they don't work 100% of the time. So when you peel away the tape, you might see some areas kicked up and did splinter. We're gonna go on in with a zip sander just to clean up the edges. This is a 120 grit sandpaper. You don't need anything too rough. You just wanna make sure that there's no splinters sticking off the sides. Now I'm gonna move on to the desk and the shelves that we cut earlier. Now, because this desk piece is like the focal point of this project, I actually don't like how much is splintered on the side. I'm gonna sand it down, but when you flip it over, it should be nice and just perfect for you. There's a couple of areas, but this side is a little bit more clean, so I am gonna use the opposite side of the wood. Little tip for you guys. Everything is sanded and good to go, so I'm gonna make my marks for my guidelines of where I want my shelves and my desk. I'm gonna start with the desk first, since that's the focal point of the entire thing. I want it just 12 inches up from the bottom. That's gonna give it enough space on my wall. Take your straight edge, do the same thing we did before, you just want a guideline. Now that we have the guideline for the desk, I also want to make guidelines on the opposite side of the wood. Just when you're drilling and lining up the shelves, it's nice to have eyes on the straight line on both sides to make your life a lot easier. You want to carry these little lines over to the side, make little tick marks on the side. With the shelves, I like to put the wood directly on top of the back piece of wood to get a more visual idea of where I want them to go. Once you have your shelves where you'd like them, do the same thing that we did before by making a tick mark on the side, and I'm gonna mark it towards the bottom of the shelf. So that way, when I make the straight line across, I would be resting the wood on top of the guideline. Once you mark your shelves, you can move them. Then take that speed square, line it up with that tick mark that you just made. And then what I like to do is go in with the measuring tape and see exactly how far down you marked. And sometimes for measurements for me, I'm like, oh, 9 3/4, but then it's a little bit more than 3/4. So what I like to do is mark directly on the measuring tape and just connect that mark to your starter line. Now that the lines are all drawn out, we're gonna go in and pre-drill some holes all the way through the wood. So you wanna make sure you're going in and evenly spacing the screws throughout that guideline that we just made, every 3 inches or so from this tick mark that we made on the outside. This way, when we are installing the wood on the opposite side, you'll have a very clear guideline to line it up perfectly. Now, if you are working on a tabletop surface you do not want to ruin, like it's the copper that I have underneath it, you want to make sure you lift up your piece of wood before you drill. So I just grabbed some 2x4 scrap wood and you shimmy it under each opposite corner. And that's gonna give you enough space to be able to drill through without worrying about ruining your table. Now that we have that done, we're just gonna repeat it to the rest of the shelves and the desk. You want to grab your wood glue and your shelf and keep it close by because we are going to be working from underneath, and when you're a one human show building something, you need everything in arm's distance. So make sure you get everything huddled together. You're going to be adding your washer to your screw, so it's like that. Once you have the screw, before we add our first line of wood glue, I'm going to go in and pre-drill this middle one. Just a little, so it's nice and in there. This guy, whoa. And now, essentially, you're just gonna line that up with the lines that we made in the drill marks. The drill will work. I just know that the impact driver is gonna give me extra oomph, so I'm just gonna switch on over to this guy. Now that you have one in, since I'm working and screwing the shelves in with the base of it being flat, I'm gonna go ahead and use a measuring tape to just double check that these are gonna be the right distance on each side so they're completely level. And again, sometimes the measurements I can't really tell, so I like to just mark where that top of the shelf is. Now that this shelf is for sure level, I'm just gonna go in with my impact driver and finish screwing all the screws into it and repeat the same process for the rest of the shelves and the desk. Now that the shelves and the desk are all drilled in, you do want to add the brackets for the extra support for the desk since we are going to be putting pressure on it when working on it. You just want to shimmy them in to be even on each side. I'm going to go ahead and measure that to fit my desk. And then once you have one screw in, you just repeat that same process to the rest of them. All that there's left to do is wipe this wood down to make sure there's no debris before we add our Danish oil sealant. All right, now that the sealant is on, I'm gonna let this dry overnight and install it tomorrow. All right, so I let this dry overnight and now it is time to install. Paul's gonna be my eyes and ears to level it out, but also my muscle to hold this up so I don't have to do that. All you gotta do is find the middle stud on your wall with a stud finder, hold your desk up in place. This is fairly light, so you can hold it up from one of the shelves. You're gonna screw a screw through the center of the desk, through the stud in the wall. Now you can kind of step back and level it out yourself, screwing on these little tick marks that we just made to secure it. All right, and I know some people don't like the looks of the screws. If that's the case, just get some natural wood filler, spackle it right on top, let it dry, sand it down, and it will look like the screws do not exist. I don't mind them, so I'm gonna leave them as is. I like the little gold accent. All we gotta do is decorate it, give this room a little refresh, and it's complete. This is the perfect project to get your feet wet in the DIY world. It's easy, functional, and stunning. I hope that you guys are inspired after seeing how simple this whole process was and you decide to give it a try. The beauty of creating is that you get to truly just have the freedom to create the perfect project that fits your space, and it will always be a one of a kind.